Let go of me, Marcus! You're hurting me! Elena's voice cracked as she clawed at the hands wrapped around her throat, her vision starting to blur around the edges. The leather seats of the BMW felt cold against her back as her ex-boyfriend's grip tightened, his face twisted with a rage she'd never seen before. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Marcus hissed, his breath hot against her face. "After everything I've given you? After I made you somebody?" The parking garage was dimly lit, shadows dancing between the concrete pillars. Elena had thought meeting Marcus here would be safe, neutral territory where they could have a civilized conversation about splitting their shared assets. She'd been so naive. "I can't breathe," she gasped, her fingernails digging into his wrists. "Good," Marcus sneered. "Maybe now you'll listen. You're nothing without me, Elena. Nothing. That pathetic little bakery of yours? Your sad attempts at independence? It's all a joke. You're 38 years old, for crying out loud. Who else is going to want damaged goods like you?" Elena's chest burned as she fought for air. Through her peripheral vision, she caught sight of a black Mercedes pulling into the parking space across from them. The headlights swept across Marcus's car before cutting out, but he was too focused on his tirade to notice. "I gave you the best years of your life," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with venom. "And this is how you repay me? By embarrassing me in front of everyone? By making me look like a fool?" The betrayal was still fresh in Elena's mind, walking into their shared penthouse 3 weeks ago to find Marcus in their bed with Sophia, her 25-year-old assistant from the marketing firm where Elena used to work. The same Sophia who had smiled at her every morning, who had brought her coffee and complimented her outfits. The same Sophia who was now sporting a diamond engagement ring that looked suspiciously like the one Elena had always dreamed Marcus might give her. "She's better than me?" Elena managed to wheeze out, still clawing at his hands. Marcus's laugh was cold and cruel. "In every way that matters. She's young, she's beautiful, and she doesn't question every decision I make. She appreciates what I can give her. Unlike you, always nagging, always wanting more, always making me feel like I wasn't enough. You cheated. I upgraded," Marcus corrected, his grip loosening slightly. "Sophia understands her place in a man's world. She doesn't have this ridiculous feminist notion that she needs to be independent. She lets me take care of her, the way a real woman should." Elena gasped as precious oxygen flooded back into her lungs, but Marcus's hands remained at her throat, a constant threat. "And now you want to take half of everything I've worked for?" Marcus's voice rose again. "The house, the investments, the business accounts. You contributed nothing to my success. Elena, you were just along for the ride, and frankly, you should be grateful I kept you around as long as I did." I helped build your business," Elena said, her voice hoarse. "Those marketing campaigns, the client relationships. You did paperwork?" Marcus cut her off. "Any secretary could have done what you did. Don't delude yourself into thinking you were essential." Elena's heart shattered a little more with each word. 7 years of her life, 7 years of supporting his dreams, of putting her own ambitions on hold, of believing in their future together. And this was how he saw her contribution? As nothing? "The wedding is next month," Marcus continued, and Elena could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Sophia looks incredible in her dress. Size 4, can you imagine? She's everything you never were, Elena. She makes me feel like a king, not like some failure who can never do anything right." The door of the Mercedes across from them opened quietly, but Marcus was too absorbed in his cruel monologue to notice. A tall figure emerged from the driver's seat, moving with predatory grace through the shadows. "So here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his grip tightening again around Elena's throat. "You're going to sign those papers giving up any claim to my assets. You're going to disappear quietly, maybe move back to whatever small town you crawled out of. And you're going to be grateful that I'm not pressing charges for the way you destroyed my apartment when you found out about Sophia." Elena's eyes widened. "I didn't destroy anything. I just took my clothes and—" "The vase you knocked over was worth more than your little bakery makes in 6 months," Marcus hissed. but I'm willing to overlook it if you cooperate. If you don't, his hands squeezed, cutting off her air supply again. Hey. The voice cut through the parking garage like a blade, low and dangerous and absolutely commanding. Marcus's head whipped around, his grip on Elena's throat loosening in surprise. A man stood beside their car, and even in the dim lighting, Elena could see he was nothing like Marcus. Where her ex was all sharp suits and carefully styled hair, this man was raw power personified. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans, but there was something about his presence that made the air itself feel charged. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, trying to inject authority into his voice, but Elena could hear the uncertainty creeping in. The stranger's eyes moved from Marcus to Elena, taking in her disheveled appearance, her bruised throat, her tear-stained cheeks. Something cold and deadly flickered across his features. "Take your hands off her," he said quietly, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "This is a private conversation between me and my fiancé. Why don't you mind your own business?" "Ex-fiancé," Elena corrected automatically, her voice barely a whisper. The stranger's eyes never left Marcus's face. "I'm going to say this once more, and I suggest you listen very carefully. Take your hands off her." There was something about the way he spoke, not shouting, not even raising his voice, but carrying such absolute authority that Elena felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Marcus apparently felt it too, because his hands dropped away from her throat entirely. "Look, buddy," Marcus started, but the stranger cut him off with a single raised hand. "Get out of the car," he said to Elena, never taking his eyes off Marcus. "Come here." Elena didn't hesitate. Something about this man's presence made her feel safer than she had in weeks. She scrambled out of the passenger seat, her legs shaking as she moved toward him. He stepped slightly in front of her, creating a protective barrier between her and Marcus. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Marcus demanded, getting out of his own side of the car. "This is between me and her. You have no right—" "I have every right to intervene when I see a man putting his hands on a woman who clearly doesn't want them there," the stranger replied, his voice still that same dangerous calm. "And judging by the marks on her neck, this isn't the first time." Elena's hand moved instinctively to her throat, feeling the tender spots where Marcus's fingers had pressed. "She's being dramatic," Marcus said, but Elena could see sweat beading on his forehead. "Elena's always been prone to theatrics, haven't you, sweetheart?" The way he said sweetheart made Elena's skin crawl, but before she could respond, the stranger spoke again. "What's your name?" he asked, turning slightly toward Elena while keeping Marcus in his peripheral vision. "Elena," she said softly. "Elena Martinez." "Beautiful name," he said, and something in his tone made warmth spread through her chest. "I'm Dante Romano." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena watched as all the color drained from his face, as his confident posture crumbled into something closer to terror. "Romano?" Marcus stammered. As in Romano Industries?" Dante's smile was sharp as a knife. "You know my family's business?" Elena looked between them, confused. She'd heard the name Romano before. Everyone in the city had. They were one of the most powerful families in New York, with interests in everything from construction to hospitality. But there were always rumors, whispers about the source of their influence, suggestions that their power came from more than just legitimate business dealings. "We've never had any dealings with your family," Marcus said quickly. "This is just a personal matter between me and Elena." "And yet you seem to think it's acceptable to assault women in parking garages," Dante observed. "That suggests a serious lack of judgment on your part." "It wasn't assault," Marcus protested. "It was just, we were having an argument. Couples fight sometimes." "We're not a couple," Elena said, finding her voice again. "We haven't been for 3 weeks. Not since I found you in bed with my assistant. Dante's expression darkened further. Ah, so you're not just violent, you're also unfaithful. How charming. Look, Mr. Romano, Marcus said, his voice taking on a pleading quality. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena and I are just working through some relationship issues. There's no need for you to get involved. The bruises on her neck suggest otherwise, Dante replied coolly. He turned to Elena again. Did he hurt you anywhere else? Elena shook her head, but she could feel tears starting to fall again. The gentleness in Dante's voice, the way he was treating her like she mattered, it was such a stark contrast to Marcus's cruelty that it made her emotional walls crumble. He was trying to make me sign papers, she said quietly, to give up my claim to assets we acquired together. He said I was nothing without him. Dante's jaw clenched, and Elena saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. When he looked back at Marcus, there was murder in his eyes. Is that what you think? Dante asked Marcus, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow sounded more threatening than any shout. That she's nothing? I didn't mean, because from where I'm standing, I see a woman who had the strength to leave a man who didn't deserve her. I see someone who's trying to rebuild her life after being betrayed by someone she trusted. That doesn't look like nothing to me. Elena felt her heart flutter at his words. When was the last time someone had spoken about her with such respect, such admiration? You don't understand, Marcus said desperately. She's difficult. She wants things I can't give her. She's always pushing for more, never satisfied with what she has. Sophia, my fiancée, she's different. She appreciates— I don't care about your fiancé, Dante cut him off. I care about the fact that you put your hands around this woman's throat. I care about the fact that you made her feel worthless. And I care about making sure it never happens again. He took a step closer to Marcus, and Elena watched as her ex-boyfriend seemed to shrink before her eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Dante continued, his voice still deadly quiet. You're going to get in your car and drive away. You're going to leave Elena alone. No phone calls, no texts, no showing up at her workplace or her home. And you're going to be very, very grateful that I'm in a generous mood tonight. But the papers can be handled by lawyers, like civilized people do, Dante finished. Elena will get everything she's legally entitled to, and you won't contest it. Are we clear? Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dante's expression must have convinced him otherwise. He nodded quickly. Good, Dante said. Because if I hear that you've contacted her again, if I hear that you've so much as looked at her wrong, I'll take it very personally. And trust me, you don't want me taking things personally. Marcus practically ran back to his car, fumbling with his keys in his haste to leave. Elena watched as he drove away, his tires squealing against the concrete floor of the parking garage. As the sound of his engine faded, Elena suddenly realized she was alone in a dark parking garage with a man she'd just met. A man whose very name had terrified Marcus. She should be afraid, should be backing away and making excuses to leave. Instead, she felt safer than she had in months. Thank you, she said softly, turning to face Dante fully for the first time. Up close, he was even more striking. Olive skin, dark eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a mouth that was currently curved into the gentlest smile she'd ever seen. Are you hurt? He asked, reaching out as if to touch her neck, then stopping himself. Do you need medical attention? Elena shook her head. Just bruised. It looks worse than it is. It looks bad enough, Dante said grimly. How long was he doing that to you? Tonight was the first time he actually— Elena trailed off, realizing that wasn't entirely true. Marcus had never choked her before, but there had been other incidents. Grabbing her arm too tightly during arguments, pushing her against walls when he was angry. Small escalations she'd explained away as a stress or passion. But not the first time he put his hands on you, Dante observed, reading her expression with unsettling accuracy. Elena looked down at her feet. I thought I was overreacting. He said I was too sensitive, that I was imagining things. You weren't imagining the marks on your neck, Dante said quietly. And you weren't overreacting to being treated like that. The kindness in his voice made Elena's eyes fill with tears again. I feel so stupid. 7 years of my life, and I never saw him clearly until I found him with Sophia. Even then, part of me wondered if it was somehow my fault. It wasn't, Dante said firmly. None of it was your fault. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling around them. Elena became acutely aware that she was still in her work clothes, a simple black dress and cardigan that suddenly felt inadequate under Dante's gaze. Not inadequate in a bad way, but in a way that made her hyper-aware of herself as a woman. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. When Marcus heard your name, he looked terrified. Why? Dante was quiet for a long moment, and Elena wondered if she'd overstepped. But then he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. My family has a reputation in this city, he said carefully. We're involved in businesses that require a certain level of assertiveness. Elena nodded slowly. She wasn't naive. She knew what he was really saying. But somehow it didn't frighten her the way it probably should have. And you? She asked. What do you do? I handle problems, Dante said simply. I make sure people understand when they've crossed lines they shouldn't have crossed. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. Elena knew she should be worried, should be making polite excuses, and calling an Uber to take her home. Instead, she found herself taking a step closer to him. Is that what Marcus was? A problem? A man putting his hands on a woman who doesn't want them there is always a problem, Dante replied. But yes, he was also specifically a problem because he was hurting you. Why do you care? Elena asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. You don't know me. Dante's eyes searched her face, and Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks under his intense scrutiny. I don't know, he admitted finally. But the moment I saw him touching you, saw the fear in your eyes, something in me snapped. I've never felt protective of someone so quickly. Elena's heart started beating faster. Dante! I know this is crazy, he continued, stepping closer to her. I know we just met, and I know my world is complicated in ways that would probably scare most people. But I can't stop thinking that maybe I was supposed to be here tonight. Maybe I was supposed to meet you. Elena looked up into his dark eyes and saw something there that took her breath away. Not just attraction, though that was certainly present, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing something in her that she'd forgotten existed. I should probably go, she said softly, but she made no move to leave. Probably, Dante agreed, but he didn't step back either. But I'd really like to see you again, when you've had time to process tonight. When you're ready. I don't know if I'm ready for anything right now, Elena admitted. 7 years with Marcus, and the way it ended. I don't know if I trust my judgment anymore. Then don't trust your judgment, Dante said simply. Trust your instincts. What do they tell you about me? Elena considered the question seriously. Her instincts told her that despite his dangerous reputation, despite the fact that he was clearly capable of violence when provoked, she felt completely safe with him. More than safe. She felt seen, valued, protected in a way she never had with Marcus. They tell me you're nothing like him? She said finally. I'm not, Dante confirmed. I would never put my hands on you in anger. I would never make you feel small or worthless. And I would definitely never cheat on you. The casual way he said it, as if they were already in a relationship, should have sent up red flags. Instead, it sent warmth spreading through Elena's entire body. How can you be so sure? She asked. You barely know me. I know enough, Dante replied. I know you're brave enough to leave a situation that was hurting you. I know you're strong enough to stand up for yourself, even when you're scared. I know you're loyal enough to waste 7 years on a man who didn't deserve a single day of your time. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes again, but these were different from the tears she'd shed earlier. These were tears of relief, of recognition, of hope. "I know you're beautiful," Dante continued, reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "Not just physically, though you definitely are that. But beautiful in the way you care about people, in the way you put others first, in the way you keep trying even after you've been hurt." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Elena leaned into the touch without thinking. "Dante?" she whispered. "Elena," he replied, and the way he said her name made her knees weak. "This is moving very fast," she said, even as she found herself stepping closer to him. "It doesn't have to," Dante assured her. "We can take as much time as you need. I'm not going anywhere." Elena searched his face and saw nothing but sincerity there. No pressure, no demands, just patient certainty that made her feel like the most precious thing in the world. "I'd like to see you again, too," she admitted softly. Dante's smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Tomorrow?" Elena laughed, surprising herself. When was the last time she'd laughed after crying? "Tomorrow might be a little soon." "This weekend, then?" "This weekend," Elena agreed. Dante pulled out his phone and handed it to her. "Put in your number?" Elena typed in her contact information, her hands shaking slightly. When she handed the phone back, their fingers brushed, and she felt electricity shoot up her arm. "I should probably make sure you get home safely," Dante said. "Can I follow you, or give you a ride?" "My car's here," Elena said, pointing to her modest Honda Civic a few spaces away. "I'll follow you then," Dante decided. "Make sure Marcus isn't waiting somewhere to continue your conversation." The thought hadn't even occurred to Elena, but now that Dante mentioned it, she realized Marcus might very well be vindictive enough to wait for her at her apartment. The idea of facing him again without Dante's protection made her stomach clench with anxiety. "Thank you," she said gratefully. "Always," Dante replied, and something in his tone made Elena believe he meant it literally. The drive to Elena's apartment complex took 20 minutes, and true to his word, Dante's Mercedes stayed right behind her the entire way. Elena kept glancing in her rearview mirror, hardly believing the evening's events. A few hours ago, she'd been dreading the conversation with Marcus. Now she was being escorted home by a man who made her feel things she'd never felt before. When they reached her building, Dante parked beside her and got out to walk her to the entrance. The lobby was well lit and secure, but Elena found herself reluctant to say goodnight. "This is me," she said unnecessarily, gesturing toward the building. "Nice place," Dante observed, though Elena got the impression he was just being polite. She was sure he lived somewhere much more upscale. "It's temporary," Elena said. "I'm still figuring out what comes next." "Well, you don't have to figure it out alone," Dante said softly. Elena looked up at him, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything in the span of an hour. He was so different from Marcus, where her ex had been all sharp edges and cold criticism. Dante was warm strength and protective gentleness. "Dante?" she said. "Yeah?" "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Anything." "Earlier, when Marcus heard your name, he was terrified. Should I be scared too?" Dante considered the question seriously, and Elena appreciated that he didn't immediately dismiss her concerns. "Of me personally?" "No," he said finally. "I would never hurt you, Elena. That's a promise I make very rarely, but I'm making it to you. But my world, it can be dangerous. There are people who might try to use you to get to me, or who might see you as a liability. If we're going to do this, really do this, you need to understand that." Elena nodded slowly. "And if I can handle that, then I'll spend every day making sure you never regret giving me a chance," Dante said simply. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. She rose up on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, breathing in his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. "Text me tomorrow?" she asked. "Try to stop me," Dante replied with a grin. Elena watched from the lobby windows as Dante drove away, touching her cheek where his hand had been. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful about the future. The next few days passed in a blur of text messages and phone calls. Dante was true to his word about not pressuring her. He let Elena set the pace for their communication, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But he was also consistent in a way that Marcus had never been, checking in throughout the day, asking about her work at the bakery, remembering details from their previous conversations. By Friday, Elena was counting the hours until their planned dinner date. She spent longer getting ready than she had for any date in years, finally settling on a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her feel confident. When Dante picked her up at 7, the appreciation in his gaze made all the effort worthwhile. "You look incredible," he said, offering her his arm as they walked to his car. "Thank you," Elena replied, blushing. "You clean up pretty well yourself." That was an understatement. Dante, in a perfectly tailored black suit, was enough to make Elena forget her own name. He moved with the same predatory grace she'd noticed in the parking garage, but tonight it felt less dangerous and more protective, like he was claiming her as his. Dinner was at a small Italian restaurant that Elena had never heard of, but which apparently required reservations months in advance. The owner greeted Dante like family, ushering them to a private table in an alcove that felt intimate and secluded. "This place is beautiful," Elena said, looking around at the warm lighting and authentic Italian decor. "My grandmother's recipe book is in their kitchen," Dante explained. "The owner's family and mine go way back." Elena smiled. "So this is you showing off?" "Maybe a little," Dante admitted with a grin. "Is it working?" "Maybe a little," Elena echoed, and Dante's answering laugh made warmth spread through her chest. They talked easily throughout dinner, conversation flowing from Elena's dreams for expanding her bakery to Dante's travels throughout Europe. He was intelligent and well-read, with a dry sense of humor that kept Elena laughing. More importantly, he listened, really listened, when she spoke, asking follow-up questions and remembering details. It wasn't until dessert arrived that the conversation turned more serious. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said, taking a sip of the excellent wine Dante had ordered. "Always. The night we met, you said you handle problems for your family. What does that actually mean?" Dante was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "It means when someone tries to muscle in on our territory, I convince them to reconsider. When business partners try to cheat us, I make sure they understand the consequences of that choice. When people threaten our family, I eliminate the threat." "Eliminate how?" Elena asked quietly. "However necessary," Dante replied, meeting her eyes directly. "I won't lie to you, Elena. I've done things that would probably shock you. I've hurt people who deserved it, and some who probably didn't. It's not a world for everyone." Elena nodded slowly, processing his honesty. "And if I said it scared me? Then I'd understand," Dante said simply. "And I'd let you walk away right now. No questions asked. But I'd also spend every day regretting that I couldn't be the man you needed me to be." Elena looked across the table at this complicated, dangerous, gentle man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most. "What if I said it doesn't scare me as much as it probably should?" she asked softly. Dante's eyes darkened. "Then I'd say you're either very brave or very foolish." "Maybe both," Elena admitted. Dante reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Elena, I need you to understand something. If you decide to be with me, really be with me, there's no going back to a normal life. There will always be security considerations, always be people who might try to use you against me. There will be parts of my life I can't share with you, things I have to handle alone. But," Elena prompted, sensing there was more. "But I will never lie to you. I will never betray you. And I will never, ever let anyone hurt you the way Marcus did." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "You'll be the most important thing in my world, Elena. More important than business, more important than family loyalty, more important than anything else. Can you handle being loved like that?" Elena's breath caught. The intensity in Dante's voice, the absolute certainty with which he spoke, It was overwhelming and thrilling and terrifying all at once. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "Marcus spent 7 years making me feel like I was too much trouble, too high maintenance, too demanding. I don't know what it feels like to be someone's priority." "Then let me show you," Dante said softly. Elena looked into his dark eyes and saw her future reflected there, complicated and probably dangerous, but also filled with the kind of passionate devotion she'd only read about in books. "Okay," she whispered. Dante's smile was brilliant. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, and Elena felt the gesture all the way to her toes. After dinner, Dante drove Elena home, but instead of just walking her to the lobby, he came up to her apartment. Elena's hands shook slightly as she unlocked her door, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered once they were inside, suddenly nervous about being alone with him in such an intimate setting. "Elena," Dante said softly, and something in his tone made her turn to face him. He was looking at her with such tenderness that her heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" "Come here." Elena walked toward him as if drawn by a magnet, stopping just inches away. Dante reached up to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I've been wanting to do this all evening," he murmured, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was everything Elena hadn't known she was missing. Where Marcus had been demanding and selfish even in his affection, Dante was generous and patient, coaxing rather than taking. Elena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with 7 years of pent-up longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably go," he said, though he made no move to step away. "Probably," Elena agreed, but her hands were still gripping his shirt. "I don't want to rush you," Dante continued. "You're too important for me to mess this up by moving too fast." Elena's heart swelled at his consideration. Marcus had never worried about her comfort, her readiness, her feelings. But here was Dante, holding himself back for her sake, even though she could feel the tension in his body, could see the desire in his eyes. "What if I don't want you to go?" she asked softly. Dante's eyes darkened. "Elena." "I'm tired of being afraid," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm tired of second-guessing myself, tired of letting Marcus's voice in my head tell me what I should and shouldn't want. I want you, Dante. I want this." Dante searched her face intently, looking for any sign of uncertainty. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because his next kiss was deeper, hungrier, full of promise. "Are you sure?" he murmured against her lips. "I've never been more sure of anything," Elena replied, and she meant it. 3 months later, Elena woke up in Dante's penthouse apartment, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. She stretched lazily, smiling at the slight soreness in her muscles that reminded her of exactly how thoroughly Dante had loved her the night before. "Good morning, beautiful." Elena turned to find Dante standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee and a smile that still made her heart race. He was already dressed for work in an impeccably tailored suit, but his hair was still mussed from her fingers, and there was a hickey just visible above his collar that made Elena blush. "Good morning," she replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Do you have to leave soon?" "Unfortunately," Dante said, sitting on the edge of the bed and leaning down to kiss her forehead. "But I should be home by 6. I thought maybe we could try that new restaurant downtown." Elena smiled. In the 3 months they'd been together, Dante had kept his promise about making her his priority. Despite running a complex business empire, he rarely worked late, and when he did, he always called to let her know. He remembered her schedule, surprised her with flowers at the bakery, and never made her feel like she was competing for his attention. "That sounds perfect," she said. "Oh, and Dante?" Marcus called yesterday." Dante went very still. "What did he want?" "To apologize, apparently. He said he'd been thinking about what happened in the parking garage, and he wanted to make amends." Elena took a sip of her coffee. I told him I wasn't interested, and hung up. Good, Dante said, but Elena could see the tension in his jaw. If he calls again. I'll handle it, Elena interrupted gently. But thank you for wanting to protect me. Dante's expression softened. Always, he said, echoing the promise he'd made that first night. After he left for work, Elena got dressed and headed to her bakery. The little shop had tripled its revenue since she'd started dating Dante, partly because he'd introduced her to several high-end clients who paid premium prices for custom cakes, but mostly because his confidence in her abilities had given her the courage to expand her offerings and raise her prices to what they should have been all along. She was just putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake when the bell above her door chimed. Elena looked up to see Marcus standing in her shop, looking uncomfortable but determined. I thought you might hang up if I called again, he said by way of greeting. Elena set down her piping bag and studied her ex-boyfriend. He looked tired, older somehow, with new lines around his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders that was very different from the arrogant confidence he'd displayed 3 months ago. What do you want, Marcus? She asked calmly. To apologize, he said. Really apologize, not just the quick phone call yesterday. Elena waited, saying nothing. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze. I've been going to therapy, he said finally. Sophia insisted on it after what happened in the parking garage. She said if I could treat you that way, I could treat her that way too. Elena raised an eyebrow. Smart woman. She is, Marcus agreed. Smarter than I gave her credit for. She's been asking questions about our relationship, about how it ended. She didn't like the answers. And? Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena remembered from their years together. And she made me realize that I was an absolute bastard to you, for years, not just that night. Elena said nothing, but she felt a small sense of vindication at hearing him admit it. I spent so much time making you feel small because it made me feel big, Marcus continued. Every time you succeeded at something, every time you showed independence or strength, it threatened me. So I tore you down instead of building you up. Elena nodded slowly. Yes, you did. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus said quickly. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that everything I said that night was a lie. You weren't nothing, Elena. You were everything, and I was too insecure and selfish to appreciate what I had. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, not of sadness, but of closure. Thank you for saying that. Romano treats you well? Marcus asked, and Elena was surprised to hear genuine concern in his voice. Better than I ever dreamed possible, Elena replied honestly. Marcus nodded. Good. You deserve that. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Elena, be careful with him. His world, it's not safe for people like you. People like me? Good people, Marcus said softly. People with soft hearts who see the best in everyone. Just be careful. After he left, Elena stood in her empty bakery, processing the conversation. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the back door open, didn't realize she wasn't alone, until strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. How did it go? Dante's voice was warm against her ear. Elena leaned back against his chest, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. How did you know? I have someone watching the shop, Dante admitted without apology. When Marcus showed up, I got a call. Elena turned in his arms. You left work to come here? You're more important than work, Dante said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Elena's heart swelled with love for this complicated, protective man who had turned her world upside down in the best possible way. He apologized, she said. Really apologized. I think he meant it. Good, Dante said. How do you feel? Elena considered the question. Free, she said finally. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Dante's smile was soft and proud. I'm glad. Elena rose up on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they broke apart, Dante was looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before, tender and possessive, and almost reverent. "Elena," he said softly. "Yes?" "I love you." Elena's breath caught. They'd been dancing around the words for weeks now, both feeling the emotion, but neither quite ready to voice it. Hearing it now, in her little bakery surrounded by the smell of vanilla and cinnamon, felt perfect. "I love you too," she replied, and Dante's answering smile was brilliant. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Elena felt her knees go weak. Even after 3 months, he still had this effect on her, this ability to make her forget everything else, except the way he made her feel. "Marry me," Dante said against her lips, and Elena's heart stopped. "What?" she gasped, pulling back to look at him. "Marry me," Dante repeated, his hands framing her face. "I know it's soon. I know we haven't been together long, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to protect you and cherish you and love you until we're both old and gray." Elena stared at him, speechless. This was nothing like Marcus's half-hearted hints about their future, his reluctant mentions of maybe getting engaged someday. This was a man who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. "Elena?" Dante prompted when she remained silent. "Say something, even if it's no." "Yes," Elena whispered, and then louder. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Dante's grin was triumphant as he spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, he admitted, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the afternoon light and threw rainbows across the bakery walls. "Dante, it's beautiful," Elena breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and Elena had the strangest feeling that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. "Not as beautiful as you," Dante said, pulling her close again. "I promise I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice." Elena looked down at her ring, then up at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. 6 months ago, she'd thought her life was over. Now she was standing in her successful bakery, engaged to a man who loved her desperately, feeling more alive and happy than she ever had. "I already know I did," she said, and kissed him with all the love in her heart. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility, and Elena Martinez, soon to be Elena Romano, had never felt more ready to embrace whatever came next. "My mom says I can't reach 1,000 subscribers. Please subscribe to prove her wrong."